Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome to the Sherborn Board of Selectmen meeting of October 29th, 2015, and we'll ask Diane Moores, our Assistant Town Administrator, to please read the agenda.
Good evening. We'll start by this board voting to approve or amend the agenda and then add any topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. We'll then move on to public comment and then announcements. Karen Jewell is coming in for a consideration of a grant acceptance. Then there'll be a consideration of a proclamation regarding World Pancreatic Cancer Day. Then we'll discuss at 7:30 a borrowing, which is a consideration of a reserve fund transfer request for isotope testing related to consulting that was brought back from last meeting of the board. Then we'll move on to routine business, town administrator, and financial items, where Irene Larrabee, our finance director, town accountant, will give us a health insurance update, timeline, and consideration of related statutes. And then there'll be some selectmen's items and a consideration of setting workshops and topics and future dates for those workshops. And then we will set the next meeting we have plugged in November 12th.
Okay.
And then a consideration of the town administrator's involvement.
Very good. And does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All right, a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, great. Now, public comment. We have our treasurer, Heather Peck, who has asked for some time, and then we have our tax collector, Nancy Hess, who's asked for some time. So we'll go through those.
This is very quick, but I have some good news to impart, so that's always a good thing.
That's great.
One of the things that's been happening recently amongst the communities in Massachusetts is the Bank of America has decided to dump many of them as municipal clients, government banking clients. I got word of this probably end of August, beginning of September. And quite frankly, given what I went through to transition from the interim treasurer to myself, even though I was already a signer on all of the accounts, I had been very displeased with some of the services we'd been receiving. So I went into discussions with some of the local banks, Middlesex Savings Bank, Eastern Bank, considered leaving our funds at Bank of America, and made the decision after discussion with them to move our regular general fund accounts from Bank of America to Eastern Bank. I had been running parallel for under a month when we received the phone call on Monday that we too were being dumped by the Bank of America. And I told them they were late to the party, that I had already been running parallel for a month. One of the main reasons why I decided to change was because I do think they're too big, quite frankly, to service us. We were paying over $450 a month in fees for depository accounts. They didn't do anything for us. Eastern Bank is free. So we are now saving $450 a month in fees to basically have the exact same level of services. And quite frankly, a lot of their additional services, wires, ACH transfers, are less expensive than Bank of America. We have a scanner that we have on our desk where we deposit the daily checks. That is free with Eastern Bank. We were paying a fee for Bank of America. So it just all adds up. And so the good news is we are having a savings there. And because we were already running parallel, it gave us time to sort of work out the kinks before they dumped us, because they're giving everybody 60 days notice, which quite frankly for towns like Worcester and Leominster would cripple them. I probably could have done it, well, I did do it in 30 days. I just did it parallel instead of with the pending threat. So we should be out of Bank of America by the end of November, and I'm personally really excited about the level of service we've already gotten from Eastern. They're definitely robust in terms of their e-banking and their inter-transfers and their ACHs and their wires and all of the training that they've given us during this parallel period. So I think we're in really good shape there. The second thing I wanted to share with you was the library investment, the $2.8 million. I had been doing a lot of due diligence, calling local treasurers and talking to them about what they had done in the past with investments like that, because we really are looking out a year in terms of utilizing those funds and leaving them in MMDT, which is where we typically leave our general fund cash. It's one of our higher interest earning accounts at 0.0025. I just didn't sit right with me. I felt like we should be able to get some additional monies for that. So I have identified 3 investments. I looked at many, but I identified 3 investments that fit not only with our town investment guidelines, but also with the state regulations. We have put, and don't get nervous when I tell you this, but $2.25 million at Century Bank. And why that is not a problem is because we actually had the monies fully collateralized. So they are being collateralized with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. So we have a 1-year CD that we're earning 1% on, which I know sounds crazy, but I'm excited about it. And we have a 6-month CD, so I tried to stagger the investment timeline. We have a 6-month CD of $750,000 at 0.75%, which is still terrific. And then I went with Middlesex Savings Bank. They just opened a local branch. We have our elderly housing deposits with them. It was a lower rate, but I wanted to try to spread out the money amongst different financial institutions. And also, David had asked me a while back to consider sending some business Middlesex Savings Bank's way because they are now our local town branch. So it's a slightly lower percentage rate for the same term, 6 months at 0.35%. But again, I didn't want to put all of our eggs in the Century basket. So I couldn't find any other rates as high as Century's. And then the last thing I did with the advice of the investment advisor at Eastern Bank in their capital markets division is we are doing a $345,000 investment in the town of Seekonk. They are offering a bond anticipation note for their senior center, which is a nice thing for you. It's got a coupon rate of 0.65 and a yield of 0.45, and that's also a year investment. But again, just a different kind of investment vehicle to try to earn some additional money. So the good thing about all of that is that compared to MMDT, we are earning over that 1 year for those different investments, $13,380 additional interest dollars for the town. And I am looking at other opportunities. We haven't been as aggressive in the past about doing these kinds of alternative investments and not just leaving the money in MMDT because, quite frankly, the rates weren't very different. But I think even a 0.5% rate is a good enough rate if we can have some of these mid to short-term investments a year or less. It has to be a year or less because it has to stay liquid. But just to let you know, those are some things. So I executed those, the bank investments this week. The note for Seekonk is effective November 2nd, and it's a 1-year note. So I just wanted to fill you in on those.
That's great. It sounds like
$13,000 of income is $13,000 of
and
income.
$5,000 of savings.
And $5,000 of fee savings. Yeah, so
Great.
a net 20. And that was my update for tonight.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Heather. Nice to have the good news. Chuck?
A quick question, Heather.
Sure.
Bank of America's CEO, Brian Moynihan, lives in Wellesley. Did B of A also dump Wellesley?
I do not know the answer to that.
Interesting.
And it was interesting, the gentleman on the phone with me told me that they've gotten some really good feedback. And I told him I was shocked to find out that any community was thanking them for a 60-day notice of termination of services. Mm-hmm. And then I promptly hung up the receiver of the phone. So
Good feedback.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving them feedback.
yeah.
Hey, thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Feel better.
Oh, thank you.
Nancy, you're up.
As I began the discussion before, I'm wearing really a hat as a resident and taxpayer rather than as an employee, although employment here does bring me through the streets here more often than most people. And I'm just asking you to reconsider your idea of doing a trial closure of Sanger Street. When the library starts its construction project, it will be an enormous inconvenience because it will have to be closed. But it seems to exacerbate that inconvenience by doing a trial run. And I know you say you want to see what happens so that you can plan for it. If you close the road, you close the road, and people will have to find alternatives. I've been to so many activities across the street, including Girl Scouts and the Friday night movie thing, and the Good as New shop and the activities. There's a lot that goes on there. Never mind the fact that the library has a lot of people coming and going. And that's going to send all of those people up through the worst intersection we have, second worst intersection we have in town. It's going to make that, people have to go there more to enter from that end to get into the church and to the community center and the top of the library here. So the problem, again, as I said before, is not the people coming from this side of the street, it's the people coming from Maple. So this is not going to have an effect on fixing Maple Street at all. And I do think that extending the period of time that you're going to have that closed just so that you can study it is an unnecessary inconvenience for the people who have to travel that road. So I just would, I'm not asking for any kind of a discussion tonight or anything, but if you would just give more thought to it and think from the other side of the fence of people who count on that road. It's difficult enough with the police station back road shut to have everybody, especially who work here or who have to attend the different facilities, all have to come through that one intersection there. So that's my thing. And while I'm here, I'll put the tax collector hat on and remind people we're closing in on the due date for real estate taxes. They do have a little bit extra time, but we'd appreciate it. The sooner the better.
How are the collections coming?
They're actually coming quite well. People, as I told you before, people were calling looking for their tax bills, and the tax agencies were anxious to get copies to be able to process bank payments and so forth. So we were very busy as soon as we got those out. It has slowed down now, which we've found to be typical right before the due date. But we have had people come in quite confused about the fact that they're used to November 1st, and they got the notice that the bill says November 9th on it. So we get calls on that, and we get people at the counter who say, you know, why does this paper say bills due November 1st, and the bills say it's November 9th? And I say, please read the next line where it says if they go out late, you get 30 days. So. But it has been interesting, and I hope it never, ever happens again.
So Nancy, they can pay by mail, they can pay at your office. Do we have a drop box also?
If the building is closed, there's a box on the front of the building that's a locked box, and I open it in the morning. And if the building is open but our office is closed, there's a slot in our door that goes into a locked box, and they can pay online 24/7.
Okay,
So
great.
they have many ways. So.
Thank you.
And let me just once more say, post-dated checks aren't okay. They have to be good funds when they come in our office. And the day after is a month and a day interest, so please don't miss that due date. So,
Great. Thanks, Nancy. And just on, not without discussion, but just on a sort of status basis on the road closures. So the police have been monitoring traffic. I'm hoping at some point we have a report back. The vote of the board several months ago was to have them study the traffic and then come back, and we would decide whether it made sense to continue with the idea of eventually closing that road for a period of time, or whether there were issues that made it not smart to close that road. So that would be a time for you to come back and comment whenever that gets back on our agenda.
Okay, well, I'd appreciate it if you'd let your brain do a little work on it in between. Okay.
Yeah, we need the traffic results, so we'll need to have traffic safety and the police chief or one of his people come in and explain to us what they've learned. Diane had sent me today some preliminary numbers, but they're not really analyzed, so we don't really have any basis for doing anything at this point.
The motion was actually to close it and then finish the data. We'll get the data after we close it.
Well, the motion was to take some pre-closure data too.
Right, pre and post.
Right, and the idea was we would close it, but if there were problems, we were going to reopen it, and we were going to need the data to figure out if there were going to be
And
problems.
that can happen without data.
Yeah.
It could reopen the day.
Oh, so you're saying the vote was to close it before we see the data? Is that what?
Yeah, there's nothing to analyze till we have the post data.
Okay. And do you know what the status is for the closure?
I think there's one more set of data.
Okay. So maybe, Diane,
Pretty sure we got
Move
3.
on to the other side, and Dave Bento's been doing some.
can we get Dave or the chief in to our next meeting to
Sure.
talk about this and see whether we want to, continue with the Plan A or do a different plan or what the data says. I think we just ought to, Nancy's not the first person to have some comments on this. I think we ought to just have.
But I think Sean is right. My recollection was
Yeah,
it was a vote to close it.
Okay, good. That's a good correction then.
Yeah,
All right.
on a trial basis.
So we'll hear from the chief in 2 weeks if we can. Or Dave. Great, thank you. All right. Karen Jewell, consideration of a grant acceptance. So you're going to tell us that somebody wants to give you money? Is that what it is?
It is.
Excellent.
Halloween, so we had the kids at ECDC Nursery School came over today. So I'm just bringing you a little leftover treats that we had.
Thanks.
So we want to thank our friends and the parents of the ECDC Nursery School who made a terrific lunch for us. So that was great. But the reason why I'm here today is to talk to you about the Bay Path grant. It was a $2,000 grant that we had. It was a renewal grant. We have a walking program. We have walkers who go out every Monday morning. And around 10 o'clock, they've gone through the Blackstone Canal area. They've walked the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Concord, as well as they are leaving on Monday, November 2nd to the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. Lila Vevelainen is in charge of our walking program. She's done an excellent job. And then on Monday, November 9th, they're going to Hale Reservation. So we ask folks if they're interested in walking, and it certainly was a beautiful day to get out and walk. But if you'd like to join the walking group, give a call to the office. We need you to pre-register so we know that you are coming. So I would like you gentlemen to entertain a motion to accept the funds. So
We will do that. I just had a question for you. This walking program, do these funds pay for transportation to the walking location? What do they pay for?
they pay for the Lila's salary, but in some cases this past year, because it was so snowy and we didn't do a lot of walking in the months of January, February, March, as you well might imagine, we did have monies that we could put towards transportation, and so we did the Blackstone Canal, where we rented a van, as well as up in Concord, they rented a van. So it depends on the kind of money that we have at midpoint. I'm able to kind of judge whether we're going to have money left over in the pot, and if we do, then we get to go a little further afield.
That's great. So do we have a motion on this? Well, first, any more questions? Anybody have anything else to say? Okay.
I'd move to accept the Title III grant in the amount of $2,000.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. That's great.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you.
can I also do a couple of commercials for the Council on
Sure.
Aging while I'm
Yeah,
up
please-
here?
please do,
Kind
Karen.
of give you an update on what's going on. Our Lifetime Learning semester is winding down. We had 7 programs, which ranged from the Women of the Arab Spring. We have a course right now on Alexander the Great. We have a philosophy course on ethics. But we do have 2 that will be starting up in November. We have Jack Craig, who is a very popular musician/historian who comes over and plays at Woodhaven, and this time he's going to be talking about big bands, so he will be coming November 6th and 13th, both Fridays. So if you folks are interested, please give a call to the office. We do have availability. And we did something new this year. We did a partnership with the trustees of the reservation over at Powysset Farm in Dover, and Annie Copps, who is on WTKK, is a chef, and she's worked with Julia Childs, and she had a program this past Wednesday. We had 13 folks go over there, and she's coming back on Thursday, November 12th. She will be back. And I heard rave reviews. Not only do you get to see her cook and cook with her, but you get to eat what you cook. So what's not to like about that? So I want to thank Ann Becca Brady, Pat Cassell, and Annie Jagarjan. Without those ladies, we wouldn't have the robust program that we do. So big shout out to those gals. Drop-in lunch. It's every Thursday over at Pilgrim Church. This coming Thursday, November 5th, we're having Harvey Leonard. So for all you meteorologists out there or weather fanatics, Harvey is coming. So it should be a wonderful presentation. Kathy Horgan-Dye, who is our drop-in director, got him to come, and he is a tough man to get on the schedule, so we're thrilled about that. Following Thursday, November 11th, Maureen Sullivan is coming, and she's going to be talking about the Veterans Oral History program that she's running, where she speaks with veterans and they keep those records, so I think that's going to be an excellent program as well. So drop-in lunch for folks, it starts at noon over at the Pilgrim Church, and our speakers come at 12:30. It's also Medicare enrollment season. So if you have questions about your Medicare, what your coverage is, please give a call. We have a Shine counselor who comes every Wednesday, and in looking at your prescription drug benefits, you're able to save some significant money if you pair the program and the plan up together. I've talked to Sonia, and she's saved folks hundreds of dollars, and in one case she saved a lady in Framingham over $2,000, so that's a significant saving. So you should look at your Medicare enrollment, take a look at your plan, and then give us a call if you have any questions. Finally, we've got technology help for our seniors once a month at Woodhaven. Ashley and Nicole Zoe are coming on Monday, November 16th. So if you have iPads, iPhones, any sort of technology that is driving you crazy, come on over. The gals will help you out. Sherborn Old Boys Club, which is a special club that we got a grant for through the Massachusetts Lifespan Respite Coalition. It is 2 Monday mornings, and our next one is going to be Monday, November 9th. It starts at 8:30 in the Woodhaven Community Room. And Charlie Williams is going to be our featured speaker. Tom Hunt is running that program with us, and through the collaboration with our churches, who all have sent men to speak about their travels, what their vocations have been, and what their passions are. So we just recently had Ed Rose. He did a wonderful program on cars. Chief Morrissey is coming up. He'll be speaking in November as well. So if you want to hear about what's going on at the firehouse, come on down. And finally, if any of you have a friend or a neighbor, or you or your family members are in need, we have 2 elder advocates. Nan Vaida is our nurse. Linda Belfay is our social worker. They're there to help you, whether you have issues in terms of fuel assistance or whether you're returning home from the hospital. They'll help you out. And one final plug, speaking of the chief in the back of the room, we do have our home safety program, which is out there. It's a free program for seniors. Tim and his group will come in and look at your fire detectors, your CO detectors. They'll replace batteries. They'll get you new ones if you need them. And Linda or Nan will come and talk to you about COA services. And last but not least, the Sherborn Police Thanksgiving Dinner is going to be on Sunday, November 22nd at 1 o'clock at St. Teresa's. It's open to any Sherborn senior, but they do need RSVPs. They want to know how many turkey dinners to have. So it's a wonderful time. We want to thank the Sherborn PD for once again stepping forward and doing that for us. It's a great time. And that's it for me, gentlemen. Any questions?
No, great. Thanks, Karen. You do such a great job, and this is such a robust group of programs that you run. I think Nancy has a question.
Not a question. I'd like to commend Karen, and actually since Tim is here, Tim as well. They're up and running online. Their payments are received online for their lifetime learning.
That's right.
And for Tim's detector inspections and so forth. And both intend to expand on that for other things going down the road, but they're up and running. They were courageous, so I commend them.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And I don't know if that made the microphone, but it's
Okay,
our
Lifetime
tax
Learning.
collector saying that lifetime learning and the smoke detectors are online for payments now,
Right.
which is something that resulted from the vote last year in which the collector can work with other departments to collect funds. Okay, anything else? Nope? Okay, good. Next item is a proclamation. There was a request that the town, along with other municipalities, I guess in the state or worldwide, acknowledge World Pancreatic Cancer Day as November 13th. And we have a form of proclamation, and maybe can our clerk read the proclamation, as clerks do?
Finally.
Thank you.
And something to do. Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Proclamation. Whereas this proclamation is on behalf of the estimated 40,560 Americans who will die from pancreatic cancer in 2015, and whereas pancreatic cancer will afflict more than 48,960 Americans, and whereas of those 73% will die within 1 year of their diagnosis, and 93% of whom will die within 5 years of their diagnosis. And whereas pancreatic cancer is the fourth leading cause of cancer death in the United States, and whereas it is the only major cancer with a 5-year relative survival rate in the single digits at just 7%, and whereas this proclamation may help shine a spotlight on this disease so that progress in developing treatments and early detection will be possible, and therefore this proclamation is in observance of November 13th as World Pancreatic Cancer Day so that we may raise awareness in our community. Dated this 29th day of October 2015.
Okay, so we have a motion to
So
accept that
moved.
proclamation. Okay, second for that? I'll second that. Any further discussion of the proclamation? Okay, all in favor? Aye, of declaring this November 13th as World Pancreatic Cancer Day in Sherborn. And now we're on to the next item, which is consideration of reserve fund transfer request for isotope testing and related consulting. Diane, can we ask you to introduce this topic? How about your pen?
Back at the last meeting on October 15th, the board decided that they wanted to move it to the October 29th meeting and asked us to bring in Carol Boyce so we could better understand what the isotope testing is all about. Well, as hard as we tried, we were unable to get Carol here tonight, Roger, and we even tried to set a date for November 12th to see if that would better suit them, but they were both busy at that time too. So we're bringing it back because it was a vote of the board, and we just want to know what the board would like to do tonight regarding the reserve fund transfer.
And it looks like we had some correspondence from Marion Nutra
We did.
to the board, and I don't know, Marion, I know, would you like to read that letter to the board, or it's in our materials, but I don't know if maybe the public would like to hear your views on it, or I can read it, whatever you'd like.
I can read it, I have it with me, I'm not sure.
Okay, we can,
We have it.
Give her.
we have it if you want a copy, just come on up to the mic if you could. I thought it was a very well thought through perspective.
There was just one perspective, and I want to say in advance that I don't think I have the last word at all. They were just my thoughts and expressing my concerns about sort of the vagueness of the Mass DEP's response to your letter that I thought was really right on target. So I won't read this whole thing because I don't think it's necessary. The gist of it is that given the fact that we know and the Mass DEP knows that there's this highly contaminated pool in existence in Framingham, and they acknowledge and know that it already has spread to some degree from the site, I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to worry that it's going to eventually arrive in Sherborn. I totally acknowledge that. And the substances in question are carcinogenic, and at least one of them is, or two of them are known to cause birth defects. So, you know, it's wise to be on the safe side here, and I understand your approach from that point of view. They're also volatile and water soluble. They can be taken, they can be absorbed orally or by breathing. So residents of Framingham may not be worried about their drinking water, but they should be worried about the air they breathe. At least one of them, the trichloroethylene, is a proven cause of lung cancer among people who work, say, in facilities where there's a lot of it. So also it can be absorbed through the skin, so I think the people of Framingham are wise to worry about the fact that there's a polluted drainage ditch, I think they mentioned, near the site. On the other hand, I totally understand the DEP's stance. They have, by law and by practice, certain limits that are considered risky. And they can't be running around, you know, worrying about every tiny bit of pollution here and there, and there's lots of potential sites around. So they have certain thresholds that you have to meet for them to actually take certain actions. And depending upon the type of exposure, be it water, air, fish, or whatever, the levels are different. So it's quite a complicated formula they use, and I'm not criticizing that formula. I think it's necessary. But I was concerned by their advice to Sherborn to continue testing wells on our dime because I don't see an end to this. And I'm concerned about the long-term financial plan and also the long-term or the medium-term likelihood that we'll actually find a triggering level of pollutants in a Sherborn well. We're a long way from that now. So I don't know what the answer is. I know that we feel that we have to monitor that plume that could be working toward us. To do all that with our own money is going to be very expensive. And I'm also worried that in the short term, or maybe the medium term too, at least I didn't hear at the last meeting, and I haven't seen in any of the documents that I've looked at, any specific level of pollutants that we would have to meet in a well to actually change their course of action. And it seemed to me that if they were even remotely expecting us to find anything, they would have given us a threshold, something specific to look for. I'm also concerned that given the fact that the pollutant level in Framingham is so high, it seems to me a little bit unbelievable that a low level, even a minimal risk level at 1 or 2 wells in Sherborn would turn the tide. The group that's working on this in Framingham seems to be very well organized. They have their consultant, they have their lawyer. I just thought maybe we should consult with that group. Maybe you already have. I'm sure Mr. Demler has, and I admit I'm not well informed on this beyond what I've just said. Before jumping into drilling new wells that may or may not find anything, I think we have to keep monitoring the wells that are there, or ask the DEP to do so. But I just thought we should hold off a bit and develop a longer-term strategy and get more specifics from the DEP. That was my only comment, really.
Great, thank you very much. Chuck, you had some update on your discussions with DEP?
Can I react to that before she goes too far?
Yeah, it's actually, my longtime friend is in the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. DEP is one of many agencies in it. I've had a conversation with him. We're going to be getting together for lunch next week. He's indicated that they're happy to try to help us with no commitment, obviously. But we're trying to set up a meeting for Tuesday or Wednesday. And I share the concerns about what level are we looking for? What is the metric? What are the DEP standards? As I said, he's happy to talk to see if DEP can do anything further to help us without having made a commitment, of course. So, and that meeting should be on Tuesday or Wednesday is what we're shooting for now.
That's great. Paul?
Just a couple things. I have no problem with supporting Chuck on that meeting and seeing what happens. But I did want to talk a little bit about what you said. The issue before DEP is what is the remedial action plan for the site? And they are planning a fairly minimal remedial plan, which they plan to implement soon. And our role here was to try and get them to do more in the site and perhaps remove, at best of all possible results, would be to actually have the pool drained and removed. In order to get there, the guy from DEP said that they would need some proof that the pool wasn't stationary. I believe what they're planning for is basically to pave the thing over, do an activity use limitation, and other kinds of minimal stuff, as opposed to a full cleanup of the site. So people in Framingham want to see the site cleaned up and have expressed an interest in Sherborn supporting that. So when I talked to the guy from DEP, he was saying that he's on track to this minimal remediation standard for that site. We're not talking about work in Sherborn. We're talking about what's going to be done at that site. And into that trajectory came a letter from this board asking for wells to be tested in Sherborn. And they agreed that they are going to pay for the wells to be tested in Sherborn. But the thing is, they're not testing what he said would be decisive for him to change the trajectory he was on. What the wells in, what the testing plan is to see whether the same chemicals exist in the polluted site in Framingham and in the wells at trace amounts. The issue is there a connection between the two, or are the pollutants just naturally occurring or through use of septic systems or whatever, people disposing of stuff down their drains. So they were going to just test to see where they are and how they compare to before. Have they gone up? Have they gone down? The testing that we were talking about, or at least I was talking about, is a way to fingerprint the chemicals by which you could say this particular chemical, this molecule, actually came from the site in Framingham. And he said if there was that kind of evidence that this site was in fact migrating here, it didn't matter whether it was high or low, it would cause him to rethink the trajectory he's on towards what level of remediation, or to use different words, he would require more remediation if he thought the chemicals were in fact getting to Sherborn. But right now he doesn't know that, and so he's acting on the assumption that given that they're a low amount, given that they naturally occur, given that they could be coming from septic systems and so on, that he isn't willing to move off his current trajectory. So if we do nothing, the trajectory will be completed and there'll be minimal cleanup there. And if that happens, then maybe 5 years or 10 years later, everything may be fine. But it also may be that bingo, that stuff has migrated into Sherborn. The point of our original letter was we want to head it off at the pass, if you will, head it off at the borders of the town and stop it from coming. The only thing that he said would give him pause would be if we could identify, which he's not going to test for, but if we could identify that the chemicals in Sherborn are not naturally occurring, but in fact got to Sherborn from this site, that would make the difference.
I totally understand that. I appreciate that. The question I still have is, have they done those isotopic analyses? And I understand what that is. It is kind of a fingerprint. Not perfect, but it'd be better than what we have now. Have they done those analyses on the pollutants that they've already found in Coarse Brook or in the aqueduct?
No.
So I wonder, you know, if they are looking for evidence of spread, they may already have it. I guess they could argue that those pollutants may also have come from septic systems or elsewhere, but he seemed to imply that they were pretty sure it was from the site. I may be wrong on that.
What he said to me was that basically the burden was on us.
Right.
Unless we did something, their default position would be to have I don't want to get into technical terms because I want the public to understand this, but there's like, let's say there's 5 levels of cleanup, A, B, C, and D, or A, B, C, D, E. So he's talking about a cleanup level between D and C, and there are people in Framingham who are asking our help because they want them to go to an A level. And Sherborn is in a position to help influence that if this test was done. It would be nice if DEP would pay for it. They won't, and maybe Chuck can make that happen. It would be nice that we didn't need to do the test, and maybe Chuck can make that happen, that they will go from D or C up to a A or a B. And I want to play that out. I don't want to spend our money if we don't need to. But what he did say here, elsewhere, and to me directly outside in this building was, you know, if Sherborn came up with this fingerprinting that showed it was the same chemical, that would cause him to rethink. Was there a commitment? No. Was there a standard that it had to be of this quantity? It wasn't a question of quantity at all. It was a question of even if one molecule was the same molecule as over here, then they would know there was a pathway. Then they would know there was some connectivity that would cause a rethink.
Right. Yeah, I understand perfectly. I think there certainly is a logic there. But, you know, I'm surprised they haven't done those analyses. If they were really worried about spread, they would have done an isotopic analysis on the pollutants already found in Corsebrook or the aqueduct, or even, you know, in Framingham, closer to the site. I'm just a little worried about the signal-to-noise ratio here. I mean, Framingham has a highly polluted site. They're worried about it. Right next to a school, blah, blah, blah. And they have reason to worry. They're right. That's a big signal. They know that the nearby pollution is from that site. We have a very small signal out here in Sherborn, just 2 wells, and I'm just worried about whether that signal is enough to actually, you know, change the course of the ship at DEP. That's all. I really don't know the answer either, and you may well be right that they just need some new town that it's spread to raise the alarm at DEP. I don't know how they work exactly, but
Well, that's why we're going to hope that
yeah, hopefully you can get some more insight. But I would like you to ask
we'll
them
certainly
about-
ask those questions. But
Yeah. Is anybody thinking we're going to take any action tonight?
Well, I would just like to say, and I said this at the last meeting, this is a complex situation, and I think it's going to take to resolve it. And my concern last meeting about doing this testing is it just seems like it would be shots in the dark. Might get lucky, might hit the target, we might not hit the target, and so I'm not saying it's not a good tool, but I think if we use it, we want to make sure we're deploying it. And I don't think any of us really know how to do that. That we want to make sure we're deploying it properly. So I think, and then I think Marion raises a good point. There's also the political side of this, which is important. And so I'm looking for a more strategic approach to the problem, and somebody who is an expert, who is working for us, who can help lay out those tactics that we need to employ to see if we can identify this upstream. Might involve the isotope testing, but I think we need to come at it from a couple of different directions. And so I think the suggestion here is a good one. I'm not comfortable, which for the audience may not know what we're talking about here, but the idea is to put together a notice of intent for a town meeting warrant article for consulting and testing in the amount of $25,000, which I think is the right approach. I'm a little uncomfortable about leaving it until town meeting. I think I'd like to see more, more urgency about getting this proposal together and reserve the right to bring it back as soon as it's done. And if we think it's urgent enough after your meeting, and I've got a meeting with a hydrogeologist and Carol Boyce and some other people,
Right.
and maybe move it forward if we think that it deserves to.
When is that meeting, Mark? It's next week?
It's on the 3rd of November. So,
Which is next week, which the public, I don't think, realize what you just talked about. Both of you are doing kind of separate paths to the same ends.
Yeah, one is from a policy.
And that's relevant to this discussion. You may very well find a different avenue than what this is. Your point is, we might go the 25, you might find a path, you and Carol Boyce and Darrell might come up with something.
25,000 in the end is going to be enough for this.
No, it may
but,
not.
I think it's a good place to start.
DEP is usually pretty vigilant about making sure that a site is controlled. And so what Paul's talking about in terms of whether they do an AUL or clean up A through E, and I wasn't part of that conversation, Paul, so I don't really know what Steve Johnson told you, but ultimately there's a licensed site professional, there are licensed site professionals who are working for this Framingham group, and they're going to have to come up with a plan for making sure that that site is controlled, which means that it's not migrating in our direction. At this point, we have very low levels in a couple of wells at a distance, which creates a concern that there's a bigger condition heading our way, but we don't really have a basis for knowing that there is a bigger condition heading our way. And if DEP is doing its job and ensuring that the site owner controls the migration, the contamination from their site, there shouldn't be a plume heading this way. But we're also talking about testing here, and we have a site here, and we're not really talking about doing anything in the middle. And I think one thing Marion said in terms of fingerprinting Coarse Brook or other areas, that would be a productive thing maybe for DEP to do. The second point I would want to make on this in terms of the levels we have in the well is that you never have a site that is cleaned up to a standard of perfectly clean. So it's cleaned up to a regulatory standard which allows the site professional to assess the risk and determine that it's below the levels at which there are human health effects that are actionable under the DEP regulations. So we have, in the town of Sherborn, had other releases. We've had underground oil tank releases from people's houses. We've had gasoline tank releases from places that have been gas stations. There seems to be maybe an underlying assumption of some people that the fact that those were addressed under the regulations and DEP signed off on them means that there is no contamination any place in our groundwater at this point in time, and that Sherborn is facing this threat from Framingham. We already have contamination at those kinds of levels in our groundwater at different places. The sites are controlled, but the contamination migrates away from the site, and to the extent that it gets into the groundwater at levels that are below the actionable levels, DEP doesn't require that to be cleaned up. It doesn't mean that anybody's in any great danger, but I think we are talking about spending town money. We need to be really careful we understand what we're spending it for. And we shouldn't be spending it to achieve a state of perfection or a state below the regulatory standards when we know there are other places in town that have been cleaned up to the regulatory standards. And so I would back Chuck and Mark in what they're doing and urging DEP to understand the problem better, and back Paul in his sense that we would push DEP to make sure that that site is fully controlled, and maybe even spend money for a consultant to look over their shoulder and make sure the site's fully controlled. But I think this is a little bit of a wild goose chase in terms of measuring a different constituent or a fingerprint in these wells if we don't know, A, that we're going to find anything, and if, B, there are so many other things we could do in between those wells and the town of Framingham that might also address the problem. So I'm not in favor of spending this money. I am in favor of finding out more about what we can do that's going to be more productive than this. And if there is something we can do that's more productive, there's spending money on that.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Some months ago, I think we decided that Mark and Chuck, Selectman Brandon, and Selectman Jan were going to be our leaders on this issue. And they wrote the letter. They have brought about some pretty good things. I feel like that needs to continue. So I'm going to look to Mark and Chuck to figure out what needs to be done here. My 2 cents is that I would rather do more than less. I would rather even waste $5,000 if necessary than not to do it. I do a lot of work on regulating physicians, and part of that is how many tests do you do on somebody. And sometimes if you don't take a test and the patient dies, there's a lot of anguish over that. And then you say to yourself, well, was the test indicated, wasn't it indicated? And you have doctors who do way too many tests. But in a situation where we've got a community that's vulnerable because we drink our groundwater, I'd rather encourage our subcommittee here to do more rather than less. And the other, I want to respond to something that Mike said. Yes, every community has spills. Every community has places where things have happened. But just because some things have happened doesn't convince me that we shouldn't be as vigilant, and that every spill and every contamination should be treated just as important as the very first one. So, but I think we're in agreement that let Chuck and Mark run with this for a while, and we'll bring it back and see what they recommend.
I think to that extent we're in agreement, Paul.
Well, I would,
Yeah, I just want to touch on that because I was going to say exactly that. That I'd be in support as soon as one of these two came back to us and said they need a consultant, they need the testing. They both seem to be going off on a path, and I want to see how that plays out. If it's next meeting and they want to move to ask for something, I think I'd support it.
well, I don't see any harm in having David start to frame out a consulting and testing notice. I mean, just to even start to pull it together, just give us an idea what it would look like. So I would like to make this motion to task the town administrator with drafting a notice of intent for the 2016 annual town meeting warrant, requesting an amount of $25,000 for consulting and testing related to environmental concerns. And frankly, I could drop out the $25,000 if that's
Yeah, I was going to suggest why not,
since that's just sort of a number that's been picked out of thin air.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense because my concern is none of us are technically competent enough to know what we're testing or why we're testing it. What's the metric? So putting a dollar figure on it seems foolhardy at this point.
Agreed.
Okay, so as amended.
Was that your motion? I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? I would just say I'm not opposed to having a warrant article for a consultant's RFP, and we have another 6 months or something to consider, 4 months, whatever it is, to consider whether we want to support funding for that, so.
well, let me go back to something that Mark said a little while ago. If we learn from DEP that they're going to issue their remedial action plan a week from now or 2 weeks from now or whatever information they gather, that there may be a greater urgency than waiting until town meeting. So I do want to highlight the fact that I thought, from what Steve Johnson said, that they were on track to come up with their plan for what they're going to do at that site, and that's pretty soon. We may not be able to wait till town meeting. But certainly we need to be doing something, and if we have the homework done, I agree with Mark, at least it gives us a platform where we can make choices.
Okay, so we're going to authorize David to draft a warrant article? Is that what we've got on the table?
Yeah, a notice of intent.
Notice of intent for a warrant article. Okay, great. So all in favor of that motion? Great. Chuck, do you think you'll have, or Mark, a response or something to add by the next time we meet? Should we put this back on the agenda for the next time we meet or not?
I hope so. I mean, my friend at EEA has been traveling all this week, so we just couldn't get together.
So why don't you let David know if
Right.
it turns out there's something to talk about further, we can just put it on the next agenda. If there isn't, then we won't.
But Mark would have had that meeting.
Right. And
Yeah,
the
He's got the meeting on the 3rd regardless.
Right, the question is whether that leads to anything that we need to do or
I could
that
do
he
that
wants
as
to
part
bring in
of
front of us.
selecting reports.
You
or-
could, yeah, or if you think it's something that
Yeah.
rises to a higher level, just tell
Well, David will be there.
David. Okay. All right, next item, Irene, and we'll let you kind of take us through this one. This is the health update, health insurance update timeline and consideration of statutes.
Yes, as a follow-up to last meeting with the Board of Selectmen on health insurance, I discussed the concerns with town council if we were able to include Pine Hill School in any health insurance plan changes, any kind of discussions, and they did review the union contracts and have indicated, particular to Pine Hill School, and have indicated that we can move forward with health plan design changes with the Pine Hill School group, as well as our police, CM&D, and retirees. We have scheduled a meeting for the Insurance Advisory Committee for next week, November 5th at 6 o'clock. It is a public meeting. So we're moving forward with at least the discussions. They'll be presented with the same overview that the board has received, going back to our first one, I think, in May. That'll be our first meeting. We'll be discussing that item. We are requesting that the selectmen consider to vote to release the town council opinion. I would think that the superintendent or perhaps Region School Committee and Pine Hill School Committee would like to have a copy of this opinion, but that is completely up to the board to determine if you'd like to release it or not.
Okay.
I think this was a
Release.
subject that I was recused on, so
You re-recusing yourself?
my recusal arises out of MIA and the GIC, and you haven't mentioned those, but it could lead to those outfits being hired by the town, so I guess that's enough of a connection that I should recuse myself.
Okay.
Do we want to set the next meeting date while Paul is still here? Is that the last?
Yes, we were planning on 11/12 as the next meeting date.
That works
That's
for
2
me.
weeks from now, Thursday, typical Thursday, 6 o'clock time.
That works for me.
Okay, great.
Could we do another one after that? Because just,
You want to do Thursday the 24th, Mark? 26th?
26.
you're going to tell me that's Thanksgiving, right?
We could maybe do Tuesday that week, if you wanted to do one the week of Thanksgiving.
That works for me.
The 24th, okay, so let's tentatively at least schedule the 24th as a,
So the 12th and the 24th?
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Irene, what you're asking us for is a vote to release this opinion to the public or to the school committee? Who are you asking us to release?
To the school committee.
Just the school
And
committee.
the region
And the
as
region.
well the superintendent.
Okay. And is that, did you have a chance to talk about that with David and see what
Yes.
his view on that was?
Yes, he was the one that
That was a good
actually
idea?
agreed that we should have something that we can provide them so
Okay.
that they know we've done our due diligence and we're going down the path.
David and Irene and I are going to a meeting with the superintendent
Right.
on the 5th, and I think it would be best if they were aware of this.
Yeah, no,
And
that makes sense to me.
I'd
too.
be in favor of that after, I had a conversation with the superintendent this morning, and
Okay.
I think this is relevant information that they should have,
Okay, good.
even prior to you guys getting there.
All right, so do we have a motion to authorize Irene to release this to the
So
school
move.
committee?
Second?
Okay, all in favor? Okay.
Thank you. In regards to the timeline, we are starting to see a sense of urgency and moving forward. We are in negotiations with the police union right now, and there is specific language within their contract that states the West Suburban Health Group. So if we were to make any changes, we would need to bring something forward relatively soon. And the other thing I needed to point out is in order to meet the advisory and selectmen's goal of trying to address health insurance costs for fiscal year 2017, we would need to have the Board of Selectmen consider adopting the statutes, the 32B sections 21 through 23, by the end of November. Otherwise, we're up against our deadline to notify West Suburban if we're changing either plan or carrier or both.
So should we decide whether it's going to be on the agenda for the 12th or the 24th?
It
I would
should-
request that we put it on the agenda for the 12th,
For the 12th, okay.
And you will have had, when is your meeting?
the 5th.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable with it before that meeting.
okay. So is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll put it on the agenda for the 12th.
Okay.
Does that give you enough time to do the statutory notice?
Yes, the statutory notice is to inform the Insurance Advisory Committee 48 hours in advance
48
of
hours, okay,
the board's consideration. So we're meeting on November 5th, so it's perfect.
okay.
Thank you.
And obviously, this is an incremental process, so considering it doesn't mean we've voted it, voting it doesn't mean we've taken any action under it, but we've got to follow all these steps to be able to take action if we were to want to take action.
Correct.
Okay, great.
I thought voting it would be taking action.
Voting it would be taking action to adopt the statute, but it
12th.
wouldn't necessarily automatically make any change in anybody's health plan, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
we'd be adopting
at
the
that point.
statute, right.
Yeah.
And that's all I had for health insurance, unless you had other questions.
I don't think so. I also understand you've been working on early budget items. You've been working to try to develop the budget in anticipation of town meeting season. Is that where?
Correct.
Where we are, good.
I've been working with 3 members on the advisory committee to do the 5-year forecast. I believe that's only been done, I believe previously it was done by Ben on advisory, and it was usually a 2-year outlook, but I was able to establish a 5-year outlook. And there is a couple considerations within that budget model that is coming out with advisory next week on Wednesday at their 7 o'clock meeting. And some of the things that we're discussing is definitely up for everybody to vote and agree or disagree on is we're looking to take off the top of the expenditure, the monies that are available for expenditures, $200,000 for tax relief. So it's not even part of the consideration of the budget. So that we're focused on reducing taxes in the town over the course of a few years. The other thing we're looking at is incorporating capital from existing revenue so that we're not asking for debt exclusion overrides for every single capital item that we have. The recommendation right now, and of course is definitely subject to vote or change, is 2% of the total revenues collected for the general fund each year would be earmarked directly for capital expenditures. For things such as computers or servers or desks that have a useful life of less than 5 years, it doesn't make sense to ask for a debt exclusion override and then do a 3-year note where it makes more sense to just pay for it up front.
Okay.
So how much is that roughly?
The capital item is $533,000. The $200,000 we'd be taking right off from the top of the tax levy. And there's 2 other items that we're looking at. Incorporating a trend-based budget for FY17 and going forward. And what that does is it looks like at your historical actual expenditures by line item to see if the trend's going up, down, or stable, and adjusting down to the line item accordingly. So that's something that we're going to be doing this year.
Music to my ears.
Great.
Great, so we'll have more on that the next meeting, maybe?
Yes, I'll be giving a presentation to the department heads on, I believe it's November 4th, meeting with advisory that night, but I'd be happy to bring that to the board whenever you'd like in November or December.
Yeah, and that would be good, and we should try to get caught up with you and on track for discussing financial policy and budget leading into the town meeting season. We had talked about maybe trying to set up a workshop for that purpose or something along those lines. In the past, sometimes we've done a Saturday morning meeting for 2 hours or a meeting on an off night for a couple hours to just address things that, it's a public meeting, it's not a hearing, so we only talk up at the table, and it's to address specific either planning items or budget type discussions, and we could talk maybe at the next meeting about doing that. We do have a warrant to vote tonight for the town administrator's salary, so can I just get a motion to?
So moved.
All right, second, all in favor? All right, so that's done, and does anybody have any other business? Move to adjourn? Oh, Diane?
Can I just let everybody know that on November 11th, we're having our Veterans Day
I
celebration?
did promise you
here at the town hall.
that you would
That's
make
okay,
it
Mike.
town administrator's report. Sorry. Go ahead.
On November 11th, we'll be hosting our annual Veterans Day celebration right here at the town hall, and everybody's welcome to come.
And there's always a great turnout there, and Diane does a fantastic job of pulling that together.
Do we know why do you know why he was here?
He was here
police
to
officer?
listen to the health insurance discussion. That's why
Okay.
he was here.
He just ran out because I got a call, and I wasn't sure why he was here, and I'm
And what time does that,
shame he
11 a.m.
11 a.m., thank you.
Great. Okay, so all in favor of adjourning? We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, great.